purpose of this recording is for educational and entertainment purposes only. None of this is financial advice.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest Daoists Lunch and DAO. My name is Eric C. Mack, and we're here on Twitter for our first live video streamed Lunch and DAO, and the first time we're venturing outside the safe confines of the Discord server. And we're doing it today because we've also got our first special guest on the show. BellGloom is the founder of the DopeWarsDAO. Dope Wars started as a loot fork, and it's more in the Grand Theft Auto universe, but I'll let him talk about that. The goal is to build both a DAO and a game, and maybe even more. So we're going to talk about DAOs and Web3 and what has drawn all of us into this crazy world. So I just want to say welcome, Bell.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I didn't realize I was that special to be the first non-Discord and special guest for the podcast. But I'm also not the founder of Dope Wars Loot. I'm just kind of the de facto community manager. The founder would be, I think, Dennis and Bertram. But I mean, I'll take the side shine there. So thanks for having me on.
Gotcha. Okay. Also want to bring in some other folks from Daoist here. Nakamomo and Igor are both joining us. Say hey, fellas.
Yeah, hey everyone. Good to see you all, and really interesting to speak to you tonight.
Hey there, future Daoists. Good to see you all.
And it's also great to have the folks in the Discord server hopefully tuning in. We are, as always, checking out the voice chat channel. So if there's any questions or comments from the Daoists, we'll be monitoring that as well. But to start off, Bell, I did want to have a point of clarity first, which is that you call yourself a card-carrying member of the Oregon Trail generation.
Yeah.
And there seems to be a really wide time frame of people that claim the Oregon Trail generation. I'm 42 years old, and I played it on an Apple II. So where were you playing Oregon Trail? What platform were you on?
I think I first played it in elementary school on also an Apple II. I was born in 1984, so and then kind of skipped a grade from second to third, so kind of 1983, depending on the way you look at it. I mean, Oregon Trail generation to me is just having experienced kind of an analog childhood and then like a digital coming of age, and having experienced like the pre-web into Web 1 into what we've all gone through over the last 10, 15 years. So.
Right, I hear you. I sometimes think it's kind of like a superpower to have existed in the pre-web days and when like libraries were a thing and like card catalogs, and then to also be competent in Web 1, 2, and now 3. Kind of feels always like a bit of a superpower to me to have all those skills. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. To start off, tell us a little bit about, the what and the why of Dope Wars and Dope Wars DAO.
So Dope Wars I showed up probably day 2. I follow a lot of Ethereum devs and like just Ethereum, like high profile people on Twitter. And I think it was OX Tuba who had mentioned how long he thinks the loot trend is going to last. I'm like, what is the loot trend? And then I looked around and noticed that Loot for Adventures had already blown up and the floor price was like 10 ETH or something at the time. And this was right before the September correction. And then just poking around, I noticed there was this other project that had launched shortly after Dope Wars Loot, and said, all right, I hadn't even really gotten into the NFT space at all. I was just really skeptical and thought, not that it was going to be like this bubble that popped right away, but I had other things to do. But I saw just kind of the potential, like for the whole idea just made sense to me right away to start with just a really, really basic foundation of the list of items. If you're not familiar with loot, I'm not going to do a whole breakdown of it. And then you kind of split off in the genre I saw as kind of a unique opportunity for that project to maybe break out and, go down its own path, because loot had already turned into like this derivative mess of just everybody minting, here's your map and here's everything else. Not that I want to like talk trash on loot in the project in general. It was just very chaotic, very hype, very mania driven, and then just became, without a DAO at the center like Dope Wars has, which is one key distinction. I think it uses the nouns DAO for its like the base of the token has the DAO attached, whereas Loot, anybody could just make a derivative, and there was no way that I could see to really centralize and make cohesive the whole project for Loot for adventurers versus Dope Wars, which with the treasury at the center of it that gets 5% of the royalties from OpenSea for each of the NFT sales. It kind of creates this model where the DAO is able to look at things that it would want to approve for derivatives and say, okay, you have our blessing, or use that for funding development, etc. So that was probably a little bit of soup, but that's my special.
And so, I mean, how's it been going so far, and what is next?
So as far as the so far is concerned, I would say at the very front, and I covered this in a YouTube video I did a little while ago for a community call recap, late October. It was just very mania driven, just like Loot at the front. And so everyone was coming in saying, oh, let's do this, let's do this. And it's like, all we have is a list of items on an SVG being sold as an NFT. Like, you have to actually like put something together and like do something. There has to be some kind of plan. So, and then the September correction on the market hit, and then everyone kind of got wrecked. And I won't go into all of the gory details, but the project just kind of, I would say, laid low for a while. But there were some strong people in the community, like Faces of ETH, who emerged to actually just kind of drive it forward. Came around kind of a cohesive aesthetic. If you see our logo, very striking. And then we have Shecky Green, also is kind of a core member. It's hard to say who's the core because nothing's really official. Who founded the Source magazine. It's one of the foundational hip hop magazines back in 1988, and I think he helped do the music for Grand Theft Auto 3. And then it's also Penguin Wizard, who's kind of like the administrative coordinator. Nobody has an official title. And then Terrence, who's kind of like the lead Solidity engineer, who's doing all the smart contracts. So that kind of core emerged. I was just some guy in the chat, but I just have natural tendency to just try to organize communities as I get into them in Discord ever since I got into crypto. And so at first I was just like doing mod stuff without being a mod, and the mod they had selected wasn't great. And so I was like, why don't you guys make me mod? And then after a little bit of resistance, I got promoted to mod. Then I pieced out for like 2 weeks. I had some personal stuff in the middle of September, and then came back. And the project now, what we've done, to kind of cut to quick a little bit, is the loot cards, which are just literally a list of items on an SVG for the NFT. There was somebody who showed up in the chat who started making pixel representations of them, these really nicely stylized and kind of clean representations of, hey, this guy has, a checkered shirt and Gucci slides, whatever. And people kept requesting, hey, will you make mine? And then it just became this natural thing. It's like, we have a treasury. Why don't we just pay this guy to make the entire set? So Mr. Fax, MRFAX, made the entire set. I think we paid him 10 ETH in total out of the treasury through a DAO proposal. And that has been folded into what I'll get to a little bit later, where we're at with the whole unbundling hustlers thing. Terrence has made a smart contract setup where the art is portioned out per item. And it does this on-chain generative art thing where the items can be essentially mixed and matched. Right now, everything's contained in the base NFT for Dope Wars, but we're coming up on the unbundling, which is this whole contract thing where we're going to, the contract is still there, and it's kind of ready to deploy to Ethereum L1, but because of the Sheeb Moon and gas prices with NYC NFT going up, it was just like, this contract costs a lot to deploy. Let's wait a little bit. And now we're getting to the point where we're trying to decide, does this even make sense to deploy to L1? Because we're going to be taking one NFT, breaking it out into 9 kind of granularized items. And then that's going to cost money or gas to interact with the contract after it's deployed. And then you're going to have to sell it or try to sell it on OpenSea. And the gas fees may exceed the value on L1. So that gets into like an L2 question. I'll allow for like a pause here because I can just keep talking because there's a lot to go over.
Yeah, I think the L1, L2 debate is obviously something that everyone's going to be going through, if not already. How did
Yep.
you decide with the initial NFT? Well, I don't know that you did NFTs or if they were just fungible tokens, but how did you decide where to deploy those? Are those layer one or are those on a side chain?
So it hasn't deployed yet. And I would mention, I kind of skipped over it. There is another token, a fungible token that was because there was the AGLD token for Loot for Adventures. That's it's listed on FTX, etc. So in early September, we came to kind of a loose consensus, like let's airdrop our own tokens. So it was 125K of a fungible token that we decided on the name of Paper. It's just a complete 100% distribution, just 125K out to each NFT as a one-time claimable airdrop. So that's out in the world, but the utility of it is pending the unbundling contract, which this gets into the L1, L2 issue. So the idea was deploy the contract on L1, and this would allow you to mint a new entity called a hustler, which would represent kind of a player character and also kind of the profile pic avatar. But in the same contract interaction, you would then take the base NFT and then the 9 items, head, shirt, etc., would then split out of the original NFT and create 9 new NFTs, which could be individually traded and then future deployment mixed and matched. And you could, with the on-chain generative art, have like more than 1 billion combinations or something of all of the different items in the loot table. So the idea was deploy that on L1, charge some amount of paper, 12.5K to start, and then a halvening every 3 months down to 0, without getting into the whole specifics of that. But then with the gas fees going up, it became this thing. I was like, okay, we'll wait for a dip in gas. And then it's gotten to the point where it's like you said, the NFT projects are going to have to face this L1, L2 issue at some point. And Terrence, I think it was about 3 or 4 days ago, pitched the idea of why don't, with the upcoming OVM 2.0 optimism update, where they're going to like an EVM equivalence, why don't we deploy the contract in a way that initializes the hustlers and the unbundled items, where the base NFT stays on L1, but all of the new items show up in the layer 2 on optimism. And then to further complicate it, we had already actually Parama, who's a non-dev, who's been working. He showed up relatively early because we were trying to figure out an L2 solution for like the whole game state, because at some point we want to actually make a game. And it's like, are we going to do this on Polygon? Are we going to do this somewhere else? And then he had showed up, I think it was middle of September, and said, hey, I've been working with Cairo for Starknet, and I have this kind of this code base. What do you guys think? And if you know anything about like ZK Starks or validity proofs or however you want to characterize it, it's a huge scalability potential. And if you could make it work, it could actually do a lot of things and like a game idea on chain that you wouldn't have to rely on a lot of off-chain models. So that is, so now the path, and right now the governance proposal is up for, it's getting past the snapshot stage. We'll go from the base layer of L1, which is the dope NFT token along with paper, along with the DAO staying on L1, then initialize that contract to basically instantiate the hustlers, which are like the shell that you equip the items to on L2 on Optimism. Because of the EVM equivalence, it kind of future-proofs it. And then we can essentially, I don't understand the technical details enough to be super intelligent, but enough to be dangerous, create a snapshot once Starknet deployment is ready, where we can take the state of things on Optimism and then initialize a game state on Starknet without any expected friction. So I'm not sure how much sense that makes to anybody.
Cool. Yeah, it does make sense to me, but I'm not sure it will make sense to everyone. But let's step it back though from the technical aspect. So how big would you say the community is now? And of those people, are any of those just players of the game, or is everyone?
There's no game right now.
There's no games.
So as far as like the size of the community, you have the people who are mostly interested in the fungible token paper. And as expected, a lot of those people are on Telegram mainly. And then you kind of have on the Discord, where we strongly discouraged price speculation and discussion of the paper token. More of like a dev community. And there's definitely some mix and match between those. Like there's some overlap. The size of the community, I would say, isn't so much the question as like the enthusiasm of it. And I think that's been one of our strengths, and that's something that I've tried to amplify as much as I can with my energy and what I do, like in a community manager role. We have a very, very highly engaged community. I think on Telegram it's like 900 members. We didn't do a lot of like the regular security stuff you would do at the front of the Discord, like CAPTCHA to prevent people from coming in. So like the number of members isn't necessarily accurate, but it's active day to day. And the quality of the discussion, I think, far exceeds a lot of the other projects that I, poke around, and I'm not trying to talk trash on anybody in particular, but it's medium big is what I'd say.
Okay.
And the level of enthusiasm more than matches that.
Yeah, that's great. So then from the perspective of doing, the lion's share of the work, do you find that you kind of have a lot of members who are of the community who are just kind of bystanders and want to learn stuff or want to take part in voting and governance, while the lion's share of work is done by a very select few people, as is typical in such organizations?
I think, and this was actually something we talked about, because I did like an hour and a half community call yesterday. That's probably accurate. And in my role as community manager, which is again de facto, I'm not like assigned it, it just fell to me just through like force of will of me just trying to help people out in the community. It really does fall upon like a limited set of people to do the work, quote unquote. But there's also the problem of if people want to get engaged, there has to be like an onboarding step that makes sense, that isn't just somebody saying, go figure it out and go look through this channel of like 20 pages of like babbling back and forth. So that's like, honestly, like today, even like a problem I'm trying to solve by making incredibly clear, like streamlined, like guides on the Discord itself saying, if you want to do this, this is where it has been, this is where you should go, these are the resources. And that's honestly like a lot of labor, but I think that that's probably like you said, like a common problem with DAOs, where the work is going to fall to a limited set of people. And then if there's not steps taken to kind of reach back and give people kind of like a streamlined path to get into the pipeline for helping out, the catch-up step becomes kind of too much to work back from, because there's a communication overhead. If you're trying to work on something and somebody else wants to help you, but they don't know where you're at, you would have to stop and explain everything from zero to them. And then there's like a whole reconciliation of understanding between that, even if you do. So it's kind of a hard problem, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. What about from the perspective of funding? I mean, is everything just basically either bootstrapped or kind of crowdsourced from what you guys initially started? And NFT sales. So you've already sold some NFTs.
Yeah, I don't know the exact figure, but I believe the treasury is up to about 150 ETH. We've been pretty conservative with our spend. We have spent the 10 ETH for the Mr. Fax artwork, which I think is like foundational to the project. And then I think in total we've committed 10 ETH as well to Parama's work with Cairo for the eventual Starknet deployment for the game state. And then actually, back when he'd first done that, I forgot to mention he or she, I actually don't know, Anon, some Starkware devs showed up in the Discord and poked around on the GitHub, and they pledged, I think, a matching fund grant of a 10 ETH as well. I could have that figure wrong. I don't know Parama's payout in general. It's either 5 or 10, but there's a matching fund grant from Starkware on completion of the deliverable, I believe. And then go ahead.
You're selling these on OpenSea?
They're currently for sale on OpenSea.
Okay.
I'm not selling mine. I mean,
well, when I say you, I mean the collective you as a community.
Yeah, that's the marketplace. We want to set up, if we can, what we're planning for the optimism L2 thing, set up our own marketplace on L2. And what we see is like, it's kind of like a greenfield thing because nobody else is really jumping into that as hard as they can. But that's still very much something we're figuring out the details of as far as the timing of the deployment. We would want to, if the proposal passes, because it still needs to pass the governance vote for the unbundling, et cetera, over to Optimism, have it hit a timing where we have a marketplace in place to exchange the items that have been unbundled at the same time that they're initialized on Optimism. So
I know you've also got a lot of thoughts about kind of where the Web3 world is going, and I'm curious where you think we'll be 6 months, a year from now.
I've become like very increasingly like an ETH maxi, and I got into the market and I was just completely naive. I just looked at charts and it was decent at it, and I was like, fees are terrible. BNB is going to go to the moon, and it did right after I said it would. But then started to understand like what's important about centralization, dug into what ETH 2.0 is actually supposed to represent. I definitely am like a beginner in the space when you look at like the timeline of how long I've been in it. But what I've seen repeatedly is that people have been in the space longer than me, over like the 9 months, it seems like 3 years since I've been in, is there's this constant expectation that we're going to go into crypto winter, like a hard crypto winter. And several times people will be like, sell everything, get out. And I was like, I don't think it's going to happen. So I think, and it sounds quixotic or over the top, but I think crypto winter might kind of be over, and this might actually be the breakout for crypto. And a lot of people look at like the regulation pushback that everyone's worried about right now. And to me, just like following my instincts, I just say that's just a sign of strength for crypto, that they wouldn't even need to pull out that kind of those guns, because why would they bother to be so severe if it wasn't actually a threat to their yields? I mean, this gets into like macroeconomic stuff, but in 6 months from now, this isn't financial advice, but I'm not selling anything except to take maybe some profits here and there. I mean, it's become a lot easier for me to become really unmoved by like what I think is going to happen in the market ever since I got into the kind of more of the project space and focusing on that. It's like when I was trading focused on, red days, everyone's going to be emotionally affected by it. But on red days in the project space, mostly, I just kind of motivates me to work harder and just build the sort of community strength and like the intangible aspects of what I'm involved with that will still be there when the market turns around, with its daily or in weekly ups and downs. So 6 months from now, I'll still be here regardless.
So where do you think that leaves Bitcoin as the big dog? Is it going to get marginalized by ETH? I mean, Ethereum's gotten a lot closer, but will Bitcoin still be around? Will it be the stable coin one day? Will it be the gold of tomorrow?
I don't think so. I mean, it could be. Like, it depends. Like, the thing about Bitcoin is the whole idea behind its store value is 21 million Bitcoin. It's locked. It's locked in. It's always going to be 21 million. But that's only true as long as the miners decide not to reorg the chain or go to proof of stake or inflate the supply to like 50 million. Like, all of this is based on social consensus. None of this is hard coded. Like, none of this is actually like the whole on-chain immutable thing. None of that's true. Like, this is all social consensus. Like, everything could be rugged. Absolutely everything. It just comes down to like the strength of the culture and like the network effect of what's stronger. So if I like go ETH between BTC, it goes back to like a Vitalik article of convex versus concave personalities. And because Bitcoin is just so locked into the mindset of like, we're locked into 21 million supply, we're going to be the store value forever. To me, that just says you won't. And if you don't adapt to changing conditions, then they'll overcome you. They'll overwhelm you. And that's like an ETH maxi view, but that's basically what I am. So, I mean, what the timeline for that looks like, I think BTC is around for a while, but I think that'll get flipped. I've thought that for quite a while.
a flip in maybe 2022?
Late 2022, 2023, I wouldn't be surprised even slightly.
Yeah. What about other layer one protocols out there? Obviously, a lot of progress being made. Lower gas fees, already proof of stake. What's your thought on that?
Well, as they scale up in activity and actually get network activity, they have things like 17 hours of downtime with Solana, like because they had the single IDO. Like, you can do it the easy way and you can just like launch and not be decentralized, or you can do it the hard way of Ethereum and actually go through like an adversarial gauntlet and actually figure out where your weak points are. Like all of these L1s, like maybe the tech at the outset is better, but is JavaScript the best coding language like per like the immaculate construction of it? No, it just has a stronger network effect. And I don't know, the people I follow on Twitter regarding like ETH, like if it gets to like its maximal point of ETH 2.0 deployment, gas fees are not going to be a problem. Like it's going to be modularized, it's going to be sharded. Like so, like L1s, like AVAX, FTM, etc. Again, all this stuff is social consensus. Like the protocols can change. They could simply become rollups on Ethereum, or not. Like I don't know. To me, like Ethereum's the strongest bet, and now I'm just like getting into like trading mentality. But the idea is to just outperform ETH slightly and just settle back to ETH as like the base currency, because it's it has the momentum and it has the network effect and it has the dev strength, most importantly, and a lot of that comes from decentralization and culture.
Let's bring it back to Web3 really quick. Nakamomo, I think you had a question, yeah?
Yeah, well, not specifically about Web3 as such. We can stay on topic if you like.
I have trouble with that, but yeah, hit me.
No, I'll take you off topic. So I was wondering about the cypherpunk. Like it feels like there's some hardliner ideals underlying a lot of the decisions that have been made throughout this community building, and I'm really curious. I like that, and I'm really curious if that has shaped the community in any kind of way.
You're talking about like the overall like crypto community, or like Web3?
Yes, I'm talking about the no. I'm talking about DopeWars specifically.
DopeWars? Oh, well, okay. So we talked about this yesterday during the community call. There's kind of like a shared culture of like, I would call it even pre-web and like Web 1. And that whole like optimistic culture of like what the internet was meant to be at the front, like the actual www web principles, kind of getting rugged by Web 2 and all these tech bros in Silicon Valley, and the centralization, the commercialization of the internet, which has been incredibly boring and I think incredibly corrosive for society. Is it like really a cypherpunk thing? Like it's adjacent, but I don't think it's exactly one-to-one. For DopeWars, it's like the aesthetic is like this, it's kind of like GTA, but not exactly, because the genesis of DopeWars goes back to Drug Wars, which was a 1984 like DOS game, and then it became this thing where it was on people's calculators, the TI-83 version. But the way that got distributed, because it was in like the late 90s, people would just trade the program peer-to-peer. And it just literally spread across the entire world with that model. So it's less cypherpunk and more just like a peer-to-peer and like a genuine like callback to like the best, maybe it's nostalgic, but like principles of that pre-web and Web 1 era, and kind of mashed up with like a GTA vibe, which was kind of legitimized by having Shecky Green and some other people in the project who can bring out legitimacy in those connections.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of street cred there. What about so how do you describe Web 1, 2, and 3 to folks who don't really understand the eras of the internet? How do you position it?
Don't talk to those people anymore.
Don't associate with them.
I just sound like a wizard when I actually start talking to somebody who's not exposed to it. The Web 1 is really like, it was like, it goes back to like the Electronic Frontier Foundation and like the ideals that they had. And I don't have anything in front of me to like reference that right now. But the idea was like this kind of, kind of open permissionless, this open source idea that then gave way to like the .com bubble, got overcapitalized, and then that crashed, which led into Web 2, which you had this really disparate internet in Web 1 because the tech wasn't very mature. B, people were just kind of messing around. They didn't really have like existing models for how to organize socially or anything. And then Web 2 came along and capitalized it, centralized it, and commercialized it. And all of these like .com companies that busted, all of a sudden there was this monetization model for Web 2. And they have all this capital flood in because it's this huge trend that is outperforming the rest of like the macroeconomic market. And then that just leads to like Mark Zuckerberg's the only like founder in Web 2 who's even around anymore, right? And he's awful. Then Web 3 comes along, and it's really kind of like the Empire Strikes Back, but in reverse, because a lot of the same people who are part of like the Web 1 and pre-web movement were in that like cypherpunk movement that you're talking about, and kind of set the foundations for the momentum to shift as people like me and a lot of other people who didn't even go through that experience started to recognize, hey, this isn't actually just like a Ponzi scam. There's actually like some fundamental like decentralization and like very good ideas behind this movement in crypto. And the more I've like stopped paying just attention to charts and paid attention to the tech and the culture, the more I've really started to believe like Web3 can break like the whole paradigm necessary, like this whole like sequential web thing. Like we're just trying to have like a tech breakout that can actually like have a materially positive impact on society. Because I think if you look at it at like a net aggregate level, it's probably been a net negative to this point. And I don't know what other people's perspectives on that are, but.
Right. Well, the Web3 movement seems like it's certainly going to be largely dependent on the tooling that's available to communities. And what do you think are kind of the more important tools out there? What the governance tools, the various different ecosystems that need to exist in order for Web3 to really hit mainstream?
That's a really tough question, and I think if anybody had the answer to it, they'd already be kind of deploying it. I think if you look around at like the DAO Twitter space, like that's the theme, is that we need more tools in DAOs. My like immediate instinct with that is to just say that we need stronger like social energy and like good actors to step forward. And like it doesn't matter if you have a good tool. If a bad person's using it, then it's going to be a bad tool. So that's kind of like the example I try to lead. I'm kind of like altruistic, and I really am not motivated by like personal gain in a very significant way, which I've demonstrated a lot. I don't know what they would look like, but you need tools to enable like positive culture. And I think a lot of it is just like brainstorming stuff where I couldn't really elucidate it here, but NFTs, I think, provide like a mechanism that you can potentially like use to like crystallize incentives and then like activate them in a way that like fungible crypto assets absolutely do not, because they're all the same. But an NFT it's a data Lego that can plug into other data Legos, and if you kind of instantiate incentives into them and kind of make them move with each other. What that looks like as far as the DAO is concerned, I don't exactly know. If I, have an idea, I think I'll tell you. But I think the path forward lies through some sort of NFT modeling. To be honest, I don't know what exactly it looks like.
It seems like it's quite important, though, in this realm to think about bad actors and try and circumvent damage that they could do. I mean, if we start releasing all kinds of valuable things, I mean, like airdrops, you hear all the time about, somebody
I hear about it all the
wrote
time.
a bot, right? And then the bot got the lion's share of the airdrops. Well, okay, I mean, you can create as many Ethereum wallet addresses as you want and pretend to be many people. Is that something that you guys are thinking about in the work that you're doing? And is it?
I can think of an example that's not like one-to-one, but so like Dope Wars, the original game was based on like drug arbitrage. You'd go from location A to location B, try to buy low, sell high. That's like a single player game in its original state, and it's really just a random number generator with a few words attached. To try to apply that in like a multiplayer way, basically all you've done is create like a automated market maker, and that's probably just going to get botted if you attach a token to it. That's been something, I mean, if you listen to the community call that we did yesterday, I actually put it up on YouTube, has been like on my mind ever since like we started Dope Wars. And it was just like, how do you make this a game that's A, engaging, and B, doesn't just like dump the token to zero because it's just going to get botted and exploited. So like one idea that I came up with was, and this could like, my idea is like game theory isn't solved yet. Like it's always going to be evolving. So you have to try to find new dynamics and new ways to add to the mix. So say I'm buying a drug in Dope Wars and I queue a transaction, like I'm going to buy some cocaine, but it doesn't resolve right away. And there's a pending step where in a state channel on Starknet is the actual model I've thought about for this. It, in sort of a world building way, opens up like a text message with another player, but we're not communicating directly. It's using a set of pre-generated like responses, like as a dialogue tree, where there's no right answer to what either of us select. It's basically random, but it's also like influenced by whatever like sounds good to the person. And then that outcome on each side creates some sort of determinant that can't be known until somebody on a social interaction layer pushes the button. So kind of like a cooperative CAPTCHA, something like that. I don't know if that makes any sense. Like stuff like that. Like people need to go out there to figure out how to get around these problems. That's my idea.
Right. Well, in the ethos of Ethereum, it sounds like, it's very much trial and error type thing. And, to the degree that you can figure out what bad actors are going to do, you try to do that in advance, but you certainly won't be able to identify everything.
Yeah, it has to be real market conditions. And if they have like a plan of attack, like a bad actor, they're not going to show their hand until they're able to actually deploy it. So like in a testnet environment, like you're never going to figure it all out. You have to go through the adversarial step when you have a permissionless network. So like you have to kind of take the leap. So I 100% agree with that.
Can you talk at all a little bit more about, what kind of drew you into not just Dope Wars, but into, kind of deciding to go from that trader mindset and into more of a project based and actually using Web3 to create more?
Yeah. So rolling back to like when I started getting into trading, the way I started trading was to just look at charts and not using any indicators, not using any. I just tried to absorb the patterns, just using volume candles in the price line. And the idea behind that is that I distilled that down to, and whether it's valid or not, is that the foundation of all market activity can be described as a spatial representation when you look at it on the chart between like greed and fear. Those are the two like binary forces moving the price action one way or another. You can abstract it up and down. You can find an angle where that applies, I think, or at least in my conception of it. So when I started trading into the market, I was using very, very low trade volume. I would do like 200-300 trades a day with like $100 a portfolio balance. I was just constantly taking little tiny gains or avoiding larger losses. And then I got into like Discord groups. I just started joining pump groups and talking to people. And the way that I learned the market and was able to get decent at predicting it was by reading market sentiment and like the psychology of the market. And I'm not like the best trader on earth, but like for somebody who's completely novice, I was pretty good. I kind of gained a reputation in like smaller groups of amateurs, like, you know, they'll call me sensei and shit. But to me, it was like the gain was never that satisfying. Like, and at the same time, like gain is like half as stressful as like loss because you're always worried about losing it. So, and it's something I talked about in like a recap video, but there was this panel on Bankless of Ethereum devs talking about EIP 1559 back in August that I watched. And there's this recurring theme over and over again. It's like, we really need people like in the dev space. And like in community-based projects, you might think there's like 1,000 people working on this stuff, but we definitely need more like good, like-minded people. And even if you don't have a technical background, like if you have something to offer, like there is a place for you. And that was like kind of a call for me. It's like, okay, that makes sense. And I think that could be like a more satisfying like interaction with the space for me, because I don't really use technical analysis. It's just like market analysis based on talking to people, like just having interactions with people, and that just like feeds back into what I see in the chart. Like I can just aggregate that out. And ever since I got into the product space, it's just been what was a very up and down, like volatile feeling when I was paying attention to the charts all the time is a lot more evened out. And that's getting more and more as I get more like more of my like feet planted in the project space. So I think it was definitely the right move for me, and I'm going to keep going with it.
You know, it's funny when you're talking about kind of that trading mentality and kind of developing a knack for being able to kind of track the sentiment of where things are going. You know, I mean, my background's in journalism, and I'm sure people may not be surprised to learn a little peek behind the curtain that the same thing goes on with the news when you're kind of deciding what to cover and what to dedicate reporting resources to. That's definitely a consideration, is like what are people excited about now? What are people interested in? And yes, you can harvest all that information from Google Trends and from, you know, social, but to really get good at it, you got to be ahead of what's going to be trending and be like, okay, this is what is going to be trending tomorrow because I'm a human and I know what humans are into and are going to be interested in tomorrow. And so, you know, it's kind of funny. It sounds like maybe we've both been drawn to Web3 and DAOs for the same reasons, because that process becomes kind of mechanical and kind of shallow, and you're like it becomes more interesting to build things for sure.
Yeah, and like I think like towards the end of like in August and September, like I was getting very, very, very like accurate or like reading the Bitcoin chart, and the way I did it was like, okay, is everyone logging or is everybody shorting right now? Okay, everyone's shorting. It's like it would just go the opposite way. It's like whatever everybody piles into, it's going to reverse, like as far as the market's concerned. And I think that's kind of a universal effect in a way, because there's a whole vibrational energy to the universe. Like whatever, I'm not trying to like talk about energy crystals. There's a cause and effect, and there's a action and reaction. So you can kind of escape the volatility of that a little bit by getting into something that you're building, and it's more structured and it's sturdier, and you are more in control of your own destiny than just riding the waves. That's more satisfying to me.
Yeah, it's been interesting just to kind of watch the value of DAO tokens that I'm interested in. Those are doing much better than, you know, trying to ride the waves that you're talking about. Who did I cut off? Was that you, Igor?
Yeah, it was. But it's in that vein. I guess what's interesting to me is what you're describing is kind of the mindset changing from traditional, you know, employment job kind of focused career development to one where you maybe have more equity in the work that you're doing and are more in control and choosing what you're working on, and you know, ultimately are building your own portfolio of jobs.
I think that's a pretty good like window into like kind of an adjacent topic where, along with like Web 2, that was kind of like Web 1 being captured by like the traditional finance, corporate world, etc. I have had a lot of jobs, but I haven't really had a successful like career in the real world because I don't buy in. I just go from job to job to job, and I see the same patterns over and over and over again in corporate organization. The wrong people get into the positions of management, and it creates this inertia where something will gain advantage and something will become institutionalized, and then even if somebody's like pushing against it, and even if they like get a win, it's always Pyrrhic. It never actually changes anything because the table has already been set, and the people who are already eating at it, you know, they're just going to throw you scraps, if that, or they're just going to throw you out. And I think there's kind of a tidal wave of talent, energy, and intelligence that if you know, the whole DAO, Web3, crypto breakout thing can go in, you know, at least partially the right direction. There is so much more potential to what people can do than what we see, like in the world in general. And I'll like use one example, like from the real world. Like look at like a dog coin, like Shiba, like it's a scam, whatever. It's a pump and dump. Okay, what about lawn care? Like, how much in the real world is just complete bullshit and has no value, and people commit. It doesn't do anything. It just goes in a circle. It doesn't actually contribute anything to any real productive economic activity, because economies are meant to economize, which is use resources efficiently. That's not what the economy does. It just like, so it's like, if Web3 is disrupting Web2 in the corporate world, great, because it's not doing anything for anybody anyway, whether they convince you of that or not. I mean, that gets into like a whole pre-crypto thing, because I do have some political leanings, but I keep them in my pocket for the most part. It's not a.
Well, I think where it does kind of matter is from the perspective of getting people to you know, subscribe to or appreciate that there are alternative options out there. I mean, it's, you know, governments and corporations are designed to build kind of, you know, this sense of pride to kind of lock you in, right? Nobody wants to keep flipping employees. They want to have the same employees for a long time, and governments want to have citizens that continue to contribute to the tax base and vote for politicians. And ultimately, these systems are designed, you know, to do that. Whereas Web3 is very much an ecosystem that espouses, you know, sovereignty over your own decisions and financial livelihood. But if you're going to take part in a DAO, it may be some time before you earn some tokens, and it may be some time before those tokens materialize into something actually valuable or tradable. That's a different mindset than just going to get a job.
Yeah, you have to, and like going back to like the thing you were talking about, or I'm not sure who brought it up, of like only a limited set of people in a DAO actually contributing to like the core work. Like structurally, how do you like from zero create like a structure where people can contribute to like a productive activity, especially when it's like a spontaneous grouping of people? And then B, what are people's motivations? Because when you said like airdrops, as somebody who is a community manager for a token that has done an airdrop, the amount of questions I get about airdrops that I have to answer is most people are just motivated by the potential gain, and the like diamonds in the rough for like the DAO space. And you know, the people who can make money and like financialize things very, very efficiently, that has value. That's a whole different topic. but the free real estate is being the person who doesn't care that much about the tokens. That's
Right.
how you can make yourself stand out, and that's how you can really like make an impact by really like living that sentiment and doing
Yeah,
something
the
with it.
way I see airdrops is kind of like it's almost like the Groupon model, if you will, where it's like it's kind of like the loss leader, right? It's someone's
Yeah.
going to, some restaurant is going to do a Groupon. They're going to lose some money on it, but they're going to get a huge audience. And as someone who's owned a restaurant, and actually, our restaurant was directly across the street from the offices where Groupon were founded. So the entire team would eat at our restaurant on a daily basis. But the idea, I can tell you as a restaurant owner, was that you would hope to retain maybe 3%, maybe 5%, if you're lucky, of that, those new people who were introduced to your restaurant. This is kind of what maybe airdrops are designed to do as well, which is reach a broad audience. Some people hopefully will stick around, and those people will be valuable.
Yeah, I mean, it's like bootstrapping network effect, and like it's like even before my time in crypto, but like I've gone back and like researched it, and like that's what yield farming was like the whole DeFi trend in 2020. Like the tokens dumped to zero, of course, because the APY was so high, but it distributed the supply, and the protocols that actually managed to attract some talent, a lot of them are still around because it did its job. Like it's kind of another form of advertising. And it's like a half casino advertising. I don't know, because as somebody who's like started from like kind of like the base layer in crypto, as in like I went on Reddit and then like jumped into like some Wall Street pumps group. Like I never ever participated in any of those. It was just like get interactions with people. The kind of like base layer like desperation of people like chasing around like free return, if people would, and I guess not everyone's capable of it, but just like actually learn a little bit about what you're interacting with instead of just like constantly chasing like whatever free return you think is out there, maybe that would like blunt the effect of airdrops for effective projects though. So it's a hard problem. Like I'm agnostic on airdrops. Like it depends on the way it's distributed. It depends on like the tokenomics behind it. I think they're good and bad. Depends. I think ours is good overall.
Yeah. Do you think that folks are going to establish sort of expertise in various areas like tokenomics, like governance? Are these obviously it's going to be a landscape in which many new organizations are going to either establish themselves as Web3 from the get-go, or they're going to potentially want to transition to Web3 from existing models. These are some of the most important things: tokenomics and governance. How do we establish the brain trust moving forward so that we're doing them, the best way possible?
Is it completely up to me to figure it out?
It is, yeah. That's
Okay.
that's the your sole purpose on Earth.
Okay. Well, I mean, like there's the whole idea of like, what do we do to get past like coin governance? And if somebody had like figured out the model, maybe it would have emerged already. And B, if they did figure out the model, would it be strong enough to overcome coin governance? Like, if that makes enough sense, because it's a centralization problem where the governance power accrues to the people who already have the capital. So how do you solve that? To me, if I had to guess at what a solution could be, it comes through some sort of intelligent and adaptive hypothecation scheme with NFTs, because governance is based upon fungibility of the tokens that are used for governance. So the only way out of that trap would be to use some sort of non-fungible dynamic to align incentives properly in a governance model. I mean, you can try to do it through culture, you can try to do it just through being pure, etc. But that's not very reliable, and that's vulnerable to capture because capital does that and it corrupts. And I think you have to move away from fungibility in the governance model, like entirely. And that's a tricky problem. But people in general, like if you get outside of Web3, they hate NFTs. They don't get it. They don't get that these are data Legos and they can plug into each other. We have not even scratched the surface of like the potential for what they could do, not necessarily what they will do, but it is very, very like blue sky. And it gets back to like just pure thought when you really start to think about what could I do to incentivize somebody to do something with this token, which is non-fungible, and then hypothecate it into some other scheme with some other token. I would have to have something like drawn out to like provide a model. But if I get it figured out and I can solve the governance problem in general, maybe I'll DM you. We'll figure it out.
Awesome.
Yeah, please definitely do. And this has been a pretty incredible and awesome, wide-ranging conversation. We're about out of time, but I did want to give Nakamomo the last question. You've been kind of quiet. What's been on your mind over there?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and that was beautiful. So I think I see like DopeWars as a kind of micro image of the composability on Ethereum, at least one kind of issue there, because with the open structure where the community gets to create applications, events, meaningful things around it, it seems like it's open enough, even though you have a centralized treasury that seems to drive certain things forward. It seems to be open-ended otherwise. And like, how have you been thinking about the framework that will kind of, or if you have been thinking of a framework, if you want one at all, in the code and in game design?
That's tough because it's like constantly like shifting landscape. Like, a week ago, it was like we were going to deploy an L1 and just wait for dipping gas fees, but now we're going to Optimism maybe, and then like make our own marketplace and all this stuff. At the base of like DopeWars, the thing is it's permissionless. And like Dennison, who had launched it, who's not really involved in it very much day to day, his idea is if somebody wants to come in and do something with these Legos, they can do it and we shouldn't resist it. And I think the way to deal with like the idea of like somebody trying to come in and like make a derivative and capture it or like drive things in the wrong direction is just to be the better person, like provide the better example that people just want to naturally gravitate towards. Like it comes down to like kind of a cliche of like strength of community, but like make your network effect so obviously the place that people would want to like buy into that it just becomes a natural conclusion. And that's what we've tried out so far. And we've skipped a lot of like the kind of gimmicks and things that other projects go straight towards, like no staking, there's no passive return. Like we are trying to build something long-term and sustainable, at least like the quote unquote core team who's working on things day to day. And I am absolutely like 100% like part of that. And from the very beginning, I've just been like, we can do things the easy way, or we can actually try to build something like sustainable and what I like to describe as like evergreen. And it's there if we can achieve it, and other people can come play on the field too. So
cool. Well, hey, thank you very much, Bell, for taking the time to chat with us. Where's the best place to learn more about you and DopeWars and everything you do?
I'm on Twitter as BellGloom, and then the Discord is probably the best place to learn about the project. The website is a nice way to just get a look for the aesthetic, which is DopeWarsDAO if you don't want to chat. It's just cool enough to like poke around because Faces of ETH is a really good front end and UX designer. So, but yeah, hit me up on Twitter or whatever if somebody wants to talk to me. I'm very chatty, so obviously.
Cool. Thanks so much for your time today, and look forward to seeing where everything goes. And thanks to Igor and Nakamomo. Appreciate it. And thanks to the entire Daoist community. We do Lunch and DAO every Monday. See you next time.
See you. Good talk.